growing up, many people find certain things in their life that they connect to, whether it's toys, video games, movies, music, favorite clothing brands, stuff like that. And like many others, I too found myself connecting with something. And very vividly, I can remember it being Peter Pan. Now, growing up at around the age of 4, from what my parents say, I was obsessed with the movie. I probably watched it once a week, if not twice. I had a whole bunch of different toys that were dedicated to the movie. I had paper cutouts, like cardboard paper cutouts, all throughout my room of all the different Lost Boys. And it even went to the extent that my doctor and my gymnastics coach actually started calling me Tink or Peter Pan. Sometimes Pan for short. But basically, I lived and breathed that movie. It wasn't until I was about 5 years old that one of my best friends at the time for my birthday actually ended up giving me a Peter Pan costume. Now, it was nothing fancy, it wasn't anything to write home about. It had your basic Peter Pan hat, it had the sword, and the fabric itself was quite flimsy, but it had the shirt with the little tassels on the bottom. But needless to say, I fell in love with it instantly. And I don't think my parents or Jamie at the time, the friend that gave it to me, realized, but once I put that costume on, I was hooked. Now, fast forward 12 years later, when I was in high school, I found another obsession. This particular one took the form of music, and it was a British band named McFly. There was 4 members in it, and they were your pop punk, pop rock, kind of boy bandy kind of music band. They took their genres from all over the place, but basically I loved them with everything I had. Now, most teenagers at the time, 100% I'll agree, have their favorite band, their favorite TV show, celebrity, and I did too with this band. However, I felt that I took it one step further, and a lot of my friends would agree. I had every single album or EP the band ever came out with. I had every single merch that they sold, even if it was for exclusive concerts. I found a way to get it. I had every little bit of DVD or video footage that they ever appeared on a disc. And I even went as far as saving up for a full year and a half until I got enough money to actually fly myself out to England where I could see them at Wembley Arena. I was in love and I was obsessed. Now, I felt as if a lot of my friends at the time really couldn't connect with me over these obsessions and how deep they actually went. It wasn't until I actually came across a social media platform named Tumblr that I actually started to find other teens that were in the same boat. They had different fandoms that they were a part of, different interests, but we all kind of agreed on the same thing. When it came to certain things that we loved, we gave it everything we had. Now, a year later, I came across a certain TV show named Supernatural. And just like McFly, just like Peter Pan and many others, I became obsessed. Like McFly and Peter Pan, I lived and breathed it. I collected as much of the stuff I could. I watched every episode. I've probably watched, there's 14 seasons now. I've probably watched every episode at least 3 times, maybe more. But I love it. It's one of my hobbies and I love it very, very much. Now, with Tumblr, I kind of got introduced to a whole bunch of new things when it comes to fandoms. It came to shipping, so shipping 2 characters together, 2 pairings. It came to knowing everything about certain aspects of the show, even writing new stories about it called fan fiction. And there was one thing that actually I had been interested in for a while, but never really knew how to go about it. And it was conventions, or cons for short. Now, in my second last year of high school, grade 11, I actually went to my first convention. And it was unlike anything I had ever experienced before. You had your basic vendors for a bunch of goods, you had food vendors, you had a whole bunch of people there. They even had some celebrities from certain TV shows. Now, the one that I went to was called Fan Expo, and it was for a whole bunch of different genres and different fandoms, and it was a huge building in Toronto. So you had a whole bunch of different special guests from all over the world, from different TV shows, movies, horror movies, video games. It was fantastic. Now, one of the things I did notice while being there is a lot of the fans actually dressed up. Some of you might know it as costuming, but in the fandom community, it's actually called cosplaying. And that's when you're able to dress up as some of your favorite characters. You can either do it identical to the movie or TV show or anime show you've seen it in, or you can put your own spin on it. And a lot of fans actually do this. They have the generic style of what the character is supposed to be looking like, but they can make a female or a male version. They can add different aspects to it, different props. All in all, it's kind of an individual style of the character, and it's fantastic. Now, obviously, going to my first convention, I had no idea really about cosplay or how to kind of do it. But once I came across it, I fell in love with it as well. Now, I knew that there was a Supernatural convention coming up later the following year, and I knew it was my time to actually finally create a costume for this, so I could go on out, dress up as one of my favorite characters from the show, meet a whole bunch of other people, and it was going to be a blast. Now, in fandom cosplaying, it gets quite expensive. You can go about cosplaying in various different ways. You can buy costumes online that are already ready-made, almost like Halloween costumes. You can buy particular props. You can make everything from scratch. You can sew. There's a whole bunch of different ways to kind of go about it. So at first I was kind of overwhelmed with all this, and it took a little bit of kind of sieving through a whole bunch of different resources until I kind of came across things that I wanted to do. Now, for some reason, looking back on it, I don't know why I decided not to go with one particular character. I knew this Toronto Supernatural convention was 4 days long, so I was like, okay, 4 days. I'm going to do 2 costumes. So I decided to go with my 2 particular favorite characters from the show, Dean Winchester and Castiel. Both characters are very probably over cosplayed by a lot of individuals, but nonetheless, I love them, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I put together my costumes, got everything ready, and it was finally the weekend in October, and I was so excited. When I got there, I was there's probably about 100 other people dressed in the same costumes or variations of the same characters, but it was awesome nonetheless. When I was there was actually celebrities from the show, and I got to meet them, which again is quite expensive, but I got to meet Jensen Ackles, who plays Dean. I got to meet Misha Collins, who plays Castiel, and a bunch of other actors and actresses who played various characters on the show. Now, while I was there, as you probably remember me mentioning earlier, that there is vendors. And I brought money, because I knew I was going to be buying stuff, but the one prop that I did buy while there is probably one of my prized possessions, and it's this one right here. So it's stainless steel, and it's about 3 pounds. But this is the Angel Blade, and this is a weapon that Castiel uses in the show. Now, this prop here kind of put me at just over $200, which, looking at it, it doesn't really do anything other than sitting on my fandom shelf here. But it's been 4 or 5 years since I purchased this, and I haven't regretted it since. Now, this is obviously not going to be something I do every single time I go to a convention. It's just, for instance, being a student, it's not feasible. I can't afford it. So when it came to doing this Genius Hour, I knew I really wanted to make the first blade, which Dean uses in Season 9 when he becomes a demon from the Mark of Cain. Now, I did look online. I was just curious on prices for the particular prop. But everything I came across was definitely over $200, some of them going even over $400. And especially being in even further in my student life, being even poorer, I knew at the time I just could not afford buying a $400 first blade for just a prop that I wouldn't be using all that often. That would probably join my Angel Blade here on the shelf. So for my Genius Hour, I decided to kind of do some research into creating my own first blade. I took a whole bunch of pictures from the TV series, kind of compared them, tried to make measurements to see if I could kind of plan it out. And it actually ended up working out quite well. Some of the products that I used or the materials that I used is I use Model Magic, which is Crayola's kind of like air dome. And it's really awesome to work with because it does stay kind of moist for a good amount of time. You can mold it, you can kind of shape it in any shape that you'd like, and then leave it overnight and it does harden. However, Model Magic isn't the strongest or the sturdiest material, so I knew I had to kind of get creative in that sense. So what I ended up doing is I took an aluminum piece, so about 6 inches long or so. I put it on one strip of Model Magic, and then I put another layer over top of it. And then that was my basic shape or mold for the prop. After that, I slowly started to mold it into the shape of the bone. It's basically like a really big animal jaw. And once I kind of had the basic shape, I let it dry. While that was drying overnight, the next day I ended up working on the small little teeth that are formed along the jawline. And once those were dry, I was able to take certain toothpicks, poke them into the body of the blade, and then put hot glue on them and then stick the tooth on each one of them. Through that, I was able to kind of create a sturdy connection between the individual tooth, and the blade itself. Now, once that dried, I was actually able to take clay or engraving tools, and I was able to go along the body or the base of the blade where I was able to do kind of the chips or the nicks that would occur to bones over time, some of the grooves that are naturally found on bones and stuff like that. And after about 2 days of working on that, I finally had a basic body or a basic shape for the blade that I was happy with. Now after that, I had a white primer, like paint primer that you would put on walls, and I was able to apply that to the entire blade, again left that to dry, but it gave me a good starting point for where I was able to actually start doing my painting and creating that old bone look on it. The colors that I used acrylic paint, but I used light brown, dark brown, beige, burgundy, red, white, and black. Now in some areas I did use the solid color itself without mixing, but throughout it I really did mix the colors together to kind of create that wear and tear look of a bone. It wasn't obviously perfectly white, it was kind of like that dark brown as if it had been in the woods for a really long time. But through that I was able to kind of get a color consistency that I was really happy with. After that dried, I actually was able to do the fine kind of dark, reddy, burgundy colors that was kind of like a tribal print along the base of the blade. And once that was done, I was able to take leather material, wrap it around the handle of the blade, and then up throughout the jaw, which is seen in the TV show, just to kind of get that added element or added grip that Dean would have used when using the blade. Now, there's different areas when you're watching the show. Either the blade itself is clean and it looks just like a bone with the leather wrap around it, but there's also quite a lot of battle scenes. Now, for my blade, I kind of wanted to make it look as if it was just used in battle or if it was being used currently in battle. So I decided, thank goodness at the time, it was there was Halloween props were slowly starting to come out. When I had purchased the blood, I knew I was going to use it for other props, but it actually came in handy for this particular one. But it's staged Halloween blood, so when you put it on your clothes or on your face, it dries and makes it look like it's dry blood. So I kind of covered that towards the front of it over the blade section. And then I had another kind of theater blood that it was, when it dries, it actually dries tacky. So even though it's dried, it still looks like it's dripping blood. And I put a couple of drips along the top of the blade, just to make it look like it was just being used at the time. Once everything was dried, I added a little bit more different highlights with paint. Once it was fully done, I was actually quite impressed with the way that it turned out. So I can give you a show now. So this is my own personal first blade. Obviously it's not exact match to the one that's seen in the TV series. But for your first time making a prop such as this, I must say I'm quite impressed with myself. Now it did take about over 4 weeks to do. Obviously I wasn't working on it day to day. But there's a lot of research I had to do into making sure the materials would work well together, make sure that each tooth actually represented the teeth that were found on the individual first blade, and a whole bunch of other stuff like that. But I'm quite impressed with it. It's quite lightweight when compared obviously to the first blade, or to the angel blade, which makes it a lot easier when you're using it more as a cosplay prop. This one here obviously you can use if you were using it more for show, or if you're kind of taking photos and stuff, but usually this kind of piece here would usually stay for show. But this one here, because it's so lightweight, you are actually able to bring it to cons with you. Obviously that one there you wouldn't be allowed to bring in because it is quite sharp, but this one here is really good for cosplaying. Now, at the end of the day, cosplay is definitely a community on its own. It's not for everyone. Some people might look at it and see it as very juvenile. You're still costuming, you're still dressing up. Isn't that kind of something that's for kids? However, I feel as if it's a community for all ages. It's something that we can really connect over. Everyone wants to be someone that they're not, even if it has small aspects of themselves in it. And cosplaying just really gives you an outlet for doing that. You can dress up as your favorite characters from when you were a child. You can dress up from characters that are in video games. Literally anything that you want. Cosplay is really open and freeing for that, and I think it's a great community, or a great thing that everyone should experience one time in their life, or at least try to get to know.